So when you guys all signed up, you all really wanted to focus on the breakdown of analysis. So we thought, what better way to model how to analyze than looking at a text everyone is very familiar with. So if you're not familiar with the Common Module Rubric now, today is the day we're going to get familiar with it. Every now and then, I will be pointing out to the directive here on the bottom right, and that will act as a guide for how we break down our analysis. So first things first. In this common module, we highlighted the key ideas here in this first paragraph. Please note this isn't the whole common module rubric. You can access the common module rubric through NESA. This is a summarized copy of the common module rubric. So here we've analyzed individual and collective human experiences, texts that represent human qualities and emotions, as well as language is used to shape these representations. We go on to the next part of that. We're looking at context, purpose, structure, stylistic and grammatical features, and the form and shape of meaning. So let's just open up that whole section here. Last part, informed judgments about these texts. So let's break it down. We need to be able to define human quality. We need to be able to define human emotion. Notice the active key verbs prior to these highlighted sections. So how can you show your understanding of how these texts represent? How do you examine? How do you evaluate? Do you know what these words mean? What are some other words? We have explore somewhere. Yes, we have explore. We have judge, making informed judgments, making connections. What key skills are you able to account for? All rubrics ask for a certain set of skills from from all of you. In this case, we're relating context and all of these, particularly here, all of these key ideas to an idea of text and human experiences. How is this done and how well this is done depends on how you can apply these rubric expectations to the text and to the essays that you write. I also wanted to make a focus here on judgment. Judgment is a very strong word. You need to understand that being confident in your own analysis and studies gives you the opportunity to make informed decisions and opinions. Again, it's how you do that is what's really key to getting those marks. It's one thing to say emotion is a human experience. It's another thing to say, I can back it up. I can show you my reading. I can show you my analysis. I can give you examples. So let's move on, move on from just identifying. Our next step, breaking down points and applying techniques. Now, of course, if we think about the purpose of the rubric, it's an active piece of text. The rubric is there to ask us to get up to a certain standard. Let's just focus on the content itself right now, focusing on breaking down the points. Individual and collective are both explicit of each other and yet rely on each other. When we're talking about individuals, we're talking about ourselves, we're talking about key characters, experiences that are unique and solely based on the life, context, and circumstances of that individual. Remembering individuals have relationships and actions have consequences. This moves us forward to the collective. What levels of collectives are there? So we can talk family, area, region, state, country. All of these collective experiences can differ depending on these levels. So for example, the collective experiences of Australians during this COVID-19 pandemic is extremely different to those of the US or in the UK. What connects us? And think, how big can you go? Can you talk about just pandemics today? Or can you talk about pandemics that occurred over time and space? What are some common experiences that humans can relate to? Are there timeless experiences, for example, love, hate, revenge, identity? Let's have a look at the context of your prescribed text or experiences that are specific to that text. So for example, we talk about Shakespeare, who often comments on experiences concerning social class. Who else talks about social class? Tolstoy. Even the ancient Greeks talk about social class. These are experiences that transcend space and time, and you need to be able to identify universal experiences. Can you define universal experiences? Is it universal at a present time? Or again, does it transcend time and space? And can you provide reasons why these universalities occur? Second action here, or third action technically, the application of techniques. Notice in this context is made for students, a lot of active and thought-provoking tonality, and again, general connection through that word choice is very emotive, very related to the human. So let's move on to that next slide, and I'm very sorry, you're gonna be hearing my voice for a very long time. Very, very, very thick. So continuing the same idea, we're breaking down each of those key points that we highlighted in those first few slides. Texts represent human qualities and emotions associated with or arising from these experiences. So is it an experience of change? Is it emotions of discomfort, doubt, resistance? Or is it something of openness, courage, quality? You really need to consider the possibilities. It could be experiences of loss. What experiences are related to that? What emotions are related to that? What qualities are related to that? So identify these key qualities and emotions that are specific to humans and what experiences are directly related to them. So I'll give you a very common example, love. Love is a human quality associated with experiences of relationships, whether they're familial or otherwise. And consider the motivations that develop these qualities. So love could be motivated by loneliness or desire. And again, focusing on these tiles again, I broke down that key point. And if we were to apply any techniques, again, we would, its purpose is to inform students of what they need to do. So it's very direct. Moving on. Okay, so this is a very straightforward section. This section asks much of the student. It's up to you. It's important not to analyze your text, not just for the sake of analysis, but to support your understanding of human experiences with analysis. In other words, language is the vehicle that you will use to explain and exemplify these human experiences. Evidence is key. It should be taken from the text, but be sure that your examples can be used flexibly. And the reason why I tell you to do it flexibly is because you never know what question you're going to end up in with the HSC. So make sure that whatever example you do take, it's quite analytically thick. So choosing examples or text examples that have strong techniques. So some weaker techniques are tone or atmosphere or mood or setting, because they're very vague. You can't pull a lot of analysis from that. But if you've got some stronger techniques such as extended metaphor, visual imagery, allegory, intertextuality, you can pull out deeper thoughts, and it gives you more opportunities to sort of let your own voice shine out. And it's really important that when you do take these examples, you don't look at it so closely, that you always take that step back. In what place does the text play through different perspectives of time and theory? Consider again that universal point. How are techniques used to portray that? So for example, if we have a motif of war throughout a poem, how does that relate to us from, say, the 1700s, and how could that relate to us in the 21st century? Does it suggest perhaps a constant human struggle towards power? So really make sure that when you do look at that language that shapes these representations, that you look at it from a really open perspective. All right, so now we get to the really meaty parts, the anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies in human behavior and emotions. And notice here, this is where a lot of students fall down. Each of these words have a very unique definition, but they're very, very similar. And Nessa hasn't provided any specific definitions yet. So the best way I find to summarize these three ideas is what are their causes and what are the resulting effects, and how are they portrayed? Is it unexpected? Is it revealing? Is it contradictory? This will help you find a conclusion on whether it is an anomaly, a paradox, or an inconsistency. So let's look at this a little bit closer. What is an anomaly? Something deriving from what is common, usual, or expected. So again, it's something that is unexpected, and it's generally surprising. Students often think that this means that the opposite of what is expected is to occur, but that's not really the full extent of it. It's a result that does not usually fit with the course of being. When we link this back to a human experience, consider the reaction or emotions with the human experience that presents the anomaly. Does a character act or do something that is not expected in the circumstances, or perhaps it doesn't reflect how you would presume they would act? So in general, anomaly equals unexpected. Very, very general, but sometimes that can help. Now, paradox, very important you don't mix this up with a juxtaposition or an oxymoron. A paradox is very generally defined. It's initially contradictory and or perplexing, but when you further examine it, it should present a truth. So Shakespeare's Hamlet has, "I must be cruel to be kind." Reading it, you might think it's strange that someone would need to be cruel to achieve kindness. Because yes, they are opposing ideas. But looking through the context of Hamlet, it's to protect his mother, being cruel to Claudius, to be kind to his mother. Another example from Shakespeare is Macbeth, where he says, "So from that spring whence comfort seemed to come, discomfort swells." So in that case, you would assume paradox is related best to what is revealing. If it reveals something, more likely than not, that circumstance is a paradox. Now, finally, we have an inconsistency, which is what I relate to contradictory. It means that there isn't any logical explanation or reason to account for the individual's actions. What they appear to say or believe doesn't match their actions. And if it holds true for a character in your text, finding a reason why they act consistently is usually what will speak to human emotions and qualities. So if it's contradictory to the whole person or the whole circumstance, then more likely than not, it's an inconsistency. Now, if we look back again at these corner tiles where we're focusing on analyzing a text and breaking things down, we have listing, we have opportunities for interpretation, possibly a tricolon. We know it's an important part of the rubric because they emphasize this idea of inconsistency, difference, and change. So again, that's another way that you could break down a text if we were to break down the rubric as a literary piece. Oh, okay, almost there, guys. So finally, we are talking about perspectives. I'm just thinking, I'm gonna go with this. So in terms of breaking down the text, we see that it's all about perspective because it's talking about seeing the world. And the techniques is very motivating. It asks us for action. And again, it has very emotional words, verbs such as challenge and ignite. So again, that's another way that you could identify means of analysis. So when the rubric asks us to see the world differently, challenge assumptions, ignite new ideas, it really wants us to, again, take that step back. It's a direct relation to the subject of anomaly, paradox, inconsistency. You've made the conclusions, now provide the reasonings. What other points have you found in studying your text challenges these ideas? What experience that you've had yourself as a person, does that challenge any ideas that have been presented into your text? So challenge assumption that is significant life difficulties cannot be overcome. Challenge assumptions that male or female characters must have certain role in society. So these are all certain things that you might need to challenge. And these ideas that you provide will then lead us to creating judgment. Seeing the world as inevitably leading to destruction, which is different to what was thought at the time of writing. So think about how much has the world changed from when the text has been written to the point when you're reading it now. Consider the necessity of human emotions to experience life wholly. So think about how are emotions being portrayed throughout this text. Does it resonate in the same way for you? Can you give a reason why it resonates differently or the same perhaps, or even more so? So it's really, it's a really good opportunity for you to provide your own thoughts, your own reasonings, and you could even relate it to day-to-day experiences as well. You could even relate half of the text that you're reading now to the COVID-19 pandemic, but you know, that's if you just want to be really fun. Okay, so how would we rewrite a rubric? First, you would refer to the keywords, you would underline the verbs, the role in the module, which is exactly what you need to do. So learning to represent, learning to explore, learning to assess. Think of the verbs definitions. How do you show individual collective experiences? Can you define author's ideas? Can you define the importance of meaning about individual and community identity? And rewrite them into sentences. The reason why I want you to rewrite the rubric is because it helps you create your own assertions. And that is step 4 of analyzing any kind of text, regardless if it's a rubric or a poem or a story. Making your own assertions and summaries is really important to understand where you see this text and how you understand the text. So for example, if we look here, we have a very basic summary, a basic assertion of what the Common Module Rubric is about. Here on the left, we have the key ideas, individual, collective, human experiences, all the way down to see the world differently, to challenge the assumptions and ignite new ideas. And from that, we use the language and developed our own thorough understanding and created this short summary for our study period that I would refer back to as a way to ensure my essays and answers are in line with what's being asked from the rubric.